Hey everybody, welcome to myboardgameguides.com. My name is Chris, and today I will guide you through the optimal research station placement in the cooperative game Pandemic. So, if you've played any modern board games at all, you've probably heard of Pandemic. And Pandemic is a cooperative game in which 2 to 4 players come together to try to cure 4 different diseases that are plaguing the world. You basically play against the game and you try to research the cures to those diseases before things get too out of hand. So, one of the big components to Pandemic is the idea of the research station. And the beginning of the game, there is one research station in the city of Atlanta. Well, research stations are very useful because they allow you to research cures to diseases, obviously, so you'll want to have them around. But in addition to that, they also facilitate movement. So let's say we build another research station in, say, Khartoum, all the way over here. Well, if you do that, you can travel from Atlanta all the way to Khartoum without having to sacrifice a card. And that's very important because cards are what will be used to cure diseases. So the question will inevitably come up during the game: where are the best locations in which to place the research stations? Because it's a pretty big map and there's a lot of space to cover, and you really want to make your actions as efficient as possible. Well, just last week, as of this video, I stumbled across a post by a guy named Joshua Snyder who decided to look into the best ways, best locations to place research stations. And it draws upon some prior work by a guy named Matt Wigway, in that the core part of the analysis is the centrality. So if you think of these cities as a bunch of nodes that are just connected to each other, you'll generally get the picture that you want a place that is fairly central, fairly accessible to other locations. For example, you look at a place like Santiago, it's pretty isolated since the only other connection it has is Lima. Whereas if you look at a place like, say, Paris, it's connected to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different cities, which makes it a pretty decent spot to build a research station because that'll give you access to a lot of areas really quickly. Well, but that's not the only thing though. So you can definitely analyze each city in terms of the nodes that it's connected to. But you also have to consider the fact that you want it to be optimized for the whole system. You want a set of research stations that are close when you're looking at it at the world map as a whole. So, if you take all that research in tow, and all that research will be posted in the description section of this video, here's how things will lay out once you complete the analysis. So, if there's only one research station on the map, well, the only place that you can have it is in Atlanta because that's what the rules say. You have to start with a research station in Atlanta, no ifs, ands, or buts. But what if you had two cities with one research station? Well, keeping in mind Atlanta, where would be the next place that you would put it on the globe? Well, after doing a lot of analysis, Joshua came to the conclusion that you're pretty good with 2 different locations, and both locations would be in the Middle East. So you could add a research station in Baghdad, all the way over there. Baghdad's a great spot. It's connected to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities and is fairly gives you access to Europe and also to East Asia as well. Or the other option that you can consider is to move it to Cairo, which is generally the same location. Also has access to 5 different cities, and this one allows you access to Africa and South America. So that's pretty good. Well, what if you can build 3 different locations? Where would 3 research stations go? Well, you'd have one in Atlanta for sure. And you'd basically be looking at Cairo as well. Cairo is a pretty sweet spot for the reasons that I've stated above. So the third one then would be all the way in East Asia, specifically Hong Kong, because this will give you travel to East Asia without too many difficulties. You can jump from North America. If you need a quick trip to Europe, you can jump there through Cairo. But if Africa or South America is calling, you can still use Cairo to reach those regions. And then finally, if the India or East Asian parts of the globe are under threat, then you just have a guy jump all the way to Hong Kong, and that will definitely help you greatly. All right, so what about the situation in which you have 4 research stations? Well, we have Atlanta. Atlanta stays where it is. Cairo moves, actually. We take the piece from Cairo and move it all the way up to Istanbul. So that gives you a much closer angle to accessing Europe and parts of the Middle East. Hong Kong continues to be the linchpin that will give you access to Asia. And then finally, you need the 4th piece, which will be in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo gives you access to 4 different cities, and it also gives you a quick trip to Europe, gets you really close to Africa, and then also gives you the jump to South America. So definitely a very strong node to put in. In my experience when playing Pandemic, most people will only build about 4 research stations at most. But let's say you are given access to 5 locations in which to build a research station. Well, there are a lot of variations to this, but the one that I see most that I see that would be most worthwhile is just to get one to cover pretty much the main regions of the globe. So you have one in Atlanta, then the one that was in Istanbul moves over to the city of Paris, the city of lights. Hong Kong stays where it is because its location is just really too good to ignore. Then if you want to get Africa covered, well, there's always Cairo to give you access to not only this part of Africa, but also parts of the Middle East and into West Asia with Afghanistan and India and all that territory, South Asia as well. And then you have the last spot, not in Sao Paulo, because, well, Paris can cover Madrid and Sao Paulo pretty well, but you'd have it in Bogota, because that will give you access to Mexico City, Miami, Lima, and Santiago, areas that were not previously covered. So with that in tow, what happens if you somehow manage to build 6 research stations? Well, how would the arrangement look? Well, you'd have Atlanta, and you'd have Paris. But then you take the piece in Cairo and move it all the way down to Khartoum, giving you basically unfettered access to Africa. Hong Kong continues to be Hong Kong, a very valuable node that stays where it is. Bogota continues to be where it is because, well, it's a pretty solid spot that will give you access to South America without really overloading it too much. So with that, you'll notice a pretty big hole in Middle East and West Asia. So the node that Joshua recommends would be in Karachi. So based on this, Atlanta, Paris, Khartoum, Hong Kong, Karachi, and Bogota would be the 6 spots that you would go and build research stations in if you decide to go with all 6. Of course, the thing to note, though, is this arrangement assumes that the disease distribution on the board is pretty uniform, and people who have played a lot of pandemic games knows that's not true. In fact, if you decided to start off with the initial setup, like the way the game recommends, you'll notice that some areas will be more heavily infected than other areas. And for this, I've done a little bit of a shuffle the deck and did some initial placements to show a scenario in which that could happen. So we'll start out with initial diseases in the city of Tehran, in Sydney, all the way out in Australia, and Miami. So let's put those diseases on the board. We've got 3 in Miami. We've got, let's see, 3 disease cubes in Tehran. We've got 3 diseases in all the way out in Sydney. Alright, so where would the 2 go? Well, we'd have 2 in Chennai. We would have 2 in Riyadh. And we would have 2 in Delhi. Okay. Chennai is right over here. We have Riyadh right over here. And then finally Delhi, which is all the way out over here. And then finally, for our last 3 placements, we will have Buenos Aires, okay? Osaka, and Manila. Let's get those on there. So Osaka, then we have Manila, and then of course Buenos Aires. That's what it was, I think. Yes, Buenos Aires. So as you can see from this map placement, there's nothing in Europe. Europe is not an important spot, at least not yet until more of the infection cards are drawn. But a lot of the action seems to be centered around the Middle East and South Asia. You have quite a few out in East Asia, which includes Japan, the Philippines, and, well, Australia. And then you have some scattered issues all the way in Miami and South America, but not a whole lot. So in this example, stuff in Europe and even a little bit into Africa, not that important. But the stuff all the way out in the Middle East, South Asia, and East Asia, pretty important. So yes, the roles and the initial setup will definitely influence how important the priorities are. If you somehow also the priorities involving building research stations versus actually researching the cures to diseases which you need to win will also be important. So when you look at that, keep all that in mind when you play Pandemic. Obviously, with the optimization of the research station placements, great if you can pull it off, but also keep in mind that the game will kind of dictate where your research stations will be built rather than letting you have the optimal spots altogether. So, thanks for watching this. If you're interested in more strategy videos, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And hopefully I'll see you again real soon. Alright, bye-bye.